Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Michael Wann, my good buddy, the river wanderer himself, is here with me. And this is episode number 24 of Project Kids. Good morning, Michael. Tuesday morning.
Tuesday morning. Good morning, Emily. Good morning, Laura. How are you two today?
Yeah. Nice to see
I'm
everyone.
good. I'm good. I completely, whatever my mind was thinking we might talk about, we just had a very interesting personal conversation. So all my normal thoughts are derailed, but that's part of the fun of this is just coming together and seeing what happens. So, but good. I'm good.
All right. So then where do we want to begin this? Pick a topic. Say something.
Well,
if you don't have one, I got one.
All right.
I got a couple.
You start. Like sometimes I feel like the shows are like we're talking a lot about my little things and whatever. And I love it when you come with a lot of stories and where it goes. So let's go.
Well, okay, I'll give you two choices. One is like what's going on in the world, and the other is like movies.
Let's start with what's going on in the world in the first hour, and then we'll go to movies in the second hour. Let's do it.
All right. What do you think about the explosion that happened in the Pacific Ocean?
All right. So, okay. I haven't paid too much attention to it because I was obviously very distracted with the Novak Djokovic drama and all of that kind of stuff, as well as a few other things. But I did see a video of it that I'm like, dude, what? So I haven't paid too much attention. So fill me in on what they're saying. What I did find humorous was that they were telling people to evacuate beaches in California. And I was like, holy shit, the tsunami is coming, all that kind of stuff. So I saw that the other day. And then yesterday I saw a video of like the explosion and I'm like, so you tell me what they say is going on. And maybe I can react to that. And then you can tell me what you think is going on and I'll react to that.
All right. So let's go. I'll go and I'll explain what I've been exposed to about the story.
All right.
So Thursday last week, maybe Friday last week, there was first saw that it was put out that there was a big volcanic explosion that happened underwater. And is it Tonga?
Tonga, yeah.
And Tonga has been like cut off. Like Tonga, the kingdom of Tonga has been cut off from the internet. And like, we don't know anything. So that was like the first thing which I was exposed to. And then they started talking about the tsunamis. And so then they were saying like there's this Tonga is, if you could think of where Australia is, it's closer to Australia than it is to Hawaii. Right. And the explosion was going to have an impact, sending waves throughout the entire Pacific rim. So I'm like, all right, that's kind of like, it's a little bit high on my interest. And then I saw a video of like a guy who, like a TikTok thing, who recorded the booms. Like he was on land, and he's showing the sky, and you hear these booms. You're like, what the hell is those booms? Those booms, I don't know what those booms are. And then I read the story which was put out, which is this has been the biggest release of energy, the biggest explosion that has happened on Earth in over 1,000 years. In 1,000 years, it's a 1,000-year sort of thing. So then I'm like, all right, that's a line in the sand. They're saying that whatever caused it is on that level, like at 1,000 years, sort of like, it happens that rarely, or it's that big of an explosion. So I'm like, okay, I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know what metrics they're using, but that was said. And then you could see all of these other stories of like, oh yeah, it was heard. It was picked up sound wise up in Alaska and all this sort of stuff. So then the last part of it is we've got like, they're telling also the story of the potential war, which is unfolding with the Ukraine and Russia and NATO and Germany and all that stuff going on. So you've got that backstory, which is not really getting a big coverage on the mainstream news, but it's being covered more so in the geopolitical conspiracy news area. So I'm like, okay, there's that. And then I saw a video of a guy showing a satellite where you're like, you look at this white dot, the white dot's flying in, and then the explosion happens. And is this a missile? And I'm like, and all of the weird stuff, it's right by Antarctica. So you got the Antarctica stuff that came out, like, you know, the big World Economic Forum meeting. I'll see you in Antarctica. So the point is, so there are two things. So that being said, I'll give you like my take on it, and then I'll hand it back to you. So that being said, all I know is there's something crazy is going on in the world, whether that happened from underground naturally, whether that happened from, like, you know, war games, whether that's meteors coming on the outside, all this sort of stuff. So all that stuff is, like, you know, something is of interest with this explosion. So now it gets really personal for me. We talked about the loud booms and the explosion, which I heard which happened in Western Pennsylvania at the exact same time I was on High Point. So explosions are a little bit in my consciousness right now, but then there's also this. So one of the things which Jenny and I do is every turn of the phase of the moon. So every time the moon is at new moon, quarter moon, full moon, or last quarter moon, we move the starboard. So the starboard is a model of where all the planets are in the sky, and we'll sit down and we'll like move like the stones that represent the planets. Like if they move like 5 degrees in the past week, that's basically the amount of time between the phases. Like we'll move it that way. And so we do that, and that's part of like our routine. And as we do this, we also pick cards. And so we always do this. We keep it in a big book and we log it and just, you know, okay, what are these cards about? And we discuss it. So that being said, the card which we picked for the starboard for the full moon, the wolf moon, which just happened.
I knew you were going to say that. Okay. I knew you were going to say something about a wolf, because I already know where I'm going with this story. So go ahead. Yes.
So the cards, like I take cards with a big grain of salt. I like to pull cards. I like to read into them, but then I don't really like, you know, I don't like commit my plans based upon the cards, but I do notice when they're interesting. But nonetheless, the card which we chose for that night, and I think I particularly jumped out at me, and it was from a Mayan deck. Like it's a deck based upon like the Mayan glyphs, lunar, solar, and stuff like that. I've had it for a long time, and the card I chose was for I think it's pronounced Muluc. Muluc, if anyone's familiar with that. But basically what it's about is like recognizing signs, and this is on the full moon, so it's the peak of this phase. It's like recognizing signs as what they are, and not needing to have like a tangible, objective verification of what that sign means, but being able to truly trust an intrinsic knowing. And so whenever we get into intrinsic knowing, like that conversation, for me personally, I take that with a big grain of salt, because I understand how easily intrinsic knowing can overlap with bias, and how easily, like, you know, all of that sort of conditioning. So I'm like, intrinsic knowing, like before you can trust it, you have to really develop discernment. So I always carry that perspective. But when I got this card, like intrinsic knowing, like I do think intrinsic knowing is a true thing and part of the human experience, and it is a real thing. It's just messy. And so when I heard that card, like that intrinsic knowing, I'm like, that really felt like intrinsic knowing when I read that. And it was about signs, and it was in a flash. I'm like, holy shit, whatever the hell this explosion is, you know, whatever it is which we're going through, like to Mike, you know, in the way which I go about navigating reality, I'm like, that was an indication, like a line has been crossed. Whatever that thing is, this line has been crossed. We're like, okay, go on to the next stage. That was my take on this explosion.
All right. So you started talking about this, and I immediately said, well, no, I haven't paid that much close attention because I've been following the Djokovic thing pretty closely. And there was a couple other things going on that I've been sort of tracking. But for some reason, as soon as you started talking, I'm like, I wonder how this all aligns with the Djokovic situation. So first of all, Tonga is very close, pretty close to Australia, closer to New Zealand.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
But at the time that exploded, right, or that whatever it is happened, that was when they pulled him back in. So when he arrived there, they detained him, they canceled his visa. That got overturned. He was out. He was allowed to go and practice and be around in Melbourne for a couple of days. And at about the same time that the explosion happened, they announced that the minister, Alex Hawke, the Hawk, was using his personal powers now, not any real legal reason, but just his personal powers to cancel the visa. Right. And that they didn't go and arrest him at that moment, but that he was going to have to come in the morning and surrender to detention again. OK. So that was happening at the same time. Tonga is incredibly close to Australia. Novak Djokovic has had his most success in his career in Australia. He's won 9 times. This would be 10, right? Okay. So you start talking. So you said this was the most amount of energy ever released, right?
In 1,000 years.
In 1,000 years.
That's what they're telling us. That's the storyline.
And then also now they're cut off, and people are like, oh dear, that's awful. But there's probably some glory in being cut off, right? And not being subject to the rest of the bullshit, the rest of the world is not having to hear about Novak Djokovic or whatever it is, right? Okay. But check this out. So I started covering the Djokovic thing. I mean, obviously it's been going on for several months because there's this whole thing going on about his vaccine and blah, 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 right? But if you look at some of the dates on this, it kind of is in line with when Djokovic was doing certain things and making certain moves and whatever. So I did a show not this past Friday, but the Friday before, or the Wednesday before. So 2 weeks ago tomorrow, I made a show, Novak Djokovic, anti-vaxxer, archetype for freedom, right? Kind of thing. And I went into a lot of stuff about him. And I was looking a lot. And then on that Friday, I did a live stream where we were looking at him in comparison to Nikola Tesla, who's also Serbian, and they look quite similar, right? And in response to that, Eric, our friend Eric Peterson, right? And he had a show about this last night that I haven't had a chance to watch. He sent me an article that I never really got the chance to go look at because I've been so distracted with stuff about Serbian wolf people, okay? And you know, Serbians definitely have different genetics than almost any other humans on Earth. But last summer, when Novak Djokovic won Wimbledon, he talked about his connections with wolves. This is the exact quote. The exact quote is this: "I owe a lot of credit to my wolf family." Novak Djokovic joked to Eurosport, "When I was a kid, actually, I spent a lot of time in the mountains because my parents had a restaurant business from which we lived. I truly tried to manifest that kind of determined, instinctual wolf energy on the court." Right. And then Eric went and found this thing, and I haven't had as much of a chance to dig into this as I would like. And just so you know, when Djokovic showed up at the US Open in the fall, his wife showed up wearing a shirt that said, "I came with my wolf." Mm-hmm. Right. And they were like playing Hungry Like the Wolf. And you and I have talked a lot about Hungry Like the Wolf before and whatnot. But Eric sent me this article and he was talking about this, I think, in relationship to Djokovic on his own show last night. Dog-Headed Men Part 2, the Argonauts in Serbia. And this gets into a wolf and man, right? And I haven't had a chance to look at it, but there is some, deep connection between the Serbs and wolf. Like, it's as part of their legends. It's just short, so let's read it, right? "There are no accounts of Slavic mythology predating the fragmentation of the Proto-Slavic people into Western Europe and Southern Slavs, with the possible exception of a reference in Jason and the Argonauts to a battle against dogmen in what is speculated to be North Serbia, Southern Hungary. The next reference is 5 years later. A short note in Herodotus' Histories, written 800 BCE, mentions a tribe called Nuroi in the far north, whose men, Herodotus claims, transform themselves into wolves for several days each year. Some researchers have interpreted this through the Slavic folk belief in werewolves, whilst others believe that Herodotus actually referred to ancient Slavic carnival festivals where groups of young men roamed the villages in masks, sometimes referred to as Vukare, wolf humans. The identification of Nurai with Proto-Slavs remains controversial, however. And then there's this little section here about the Nurai. Let's see about that. The Nurai, a nomad people. So this is interesting based on what you and I were talking about earlier too. A nomad people, right? The carnival and all that kind of stuff. A nomad people of the north of Europe who Herodotus places in the center of the region, which now comprises Poland and Lithuania, about a river basin of the Bug. They occupied this district, which lay to the northwest of the lake, out of which the Tyras rise. The Tyras, we talked about Tyrian purple or something before, and which still bears the name in Slavonic of, I can't say that, Nurska Manja, with its chief town Nur and a river Nurets. Sometime before the expedition of Darius, they had been obliged to quit their original seats on account of a quantity of serpents with which it was infested, and had taken refuge with the Budini in the district about the Bug, which had till then belonged to that people. Though not of the same origin, in customs they resembled the Scythians and bore the reputation of being enchanters, like the Skamas among the Siberian nomads of the present day. Once a year, so the Scythians and the Greeks of Olbia told Herodotus, each of them became for a few days a wolf, a legend which still lingers among the people of Volhynia and White Russia. Okay, so Eric sent me that at that time. We have Novak Djokovic, the Serbian wolf, down there, right? This explosion happens. One of the things, and there seems to be, this was a dramatic amount of energy and attention on one person who poses no threats to anybody for the reason that they're actually saying. But if this person has this kind of the instinctual tribal energy, and remember with sports and masters of the universe kind of stuff, this is about sort of like a sacred timeline and playing things out archetypically on a world stage that directs everything else, right? The controlling the movement of this man seemed really, really important for some reason. The Tonga explosion is happening there. But yesterday I found out that he is sponsored, he used to be sponsored by Seiko, which is a not very impressive watch company compared to like Rolex or the Richard, whatever that that Nadal is sponsored by. But I found out that's not true anymore. He has a different sponsor. He has a sponsor of a watch. He's sponsored by a watch called Hublot, which is apparently very high luxury watch, right? They're very expensive. And his particular watch, so he's now a Hublot ambassador, right? But Jeff sent me something. He just signed with them in August, finally signed with a watch brand, a new beginning for Novak Djokovic as he partners with Swiss company Hublot, right? But Jeff looked up what his watch is, and his watch is the Big Bang. Hublot Mecca 10 ceramic blue, right? And when Jeff sent it to me, let me see if I can find this. Let me see if I can find this watch of his. There's this part on the watch that talks about a power reserve, right? Let me see if I can find Djokovic's watch. Let's see. That's his watch. And if you zoom in on his watch, like you can't see it in this picture, there's this part of it underneath that says power reserve on the bottom, right? And I like how you can see all the gears and stuff inside this watch. It's not behind the face, it is the face, right? But we were digging deeper into this, this watch. Let's see what they say about him here. As an athlete driven by ambition to make history in tennis, I am particularly proud of the opportunity. Okay, so there's nothing too interesting there, but he hasn't had this for his career until now, right? But it's interesting what it's called. It's called the Big Bang, right? And there was just essentially the biggest release of energy on Tonga while all of this was going on. That would be like the closest thing to the Big Bang that the Earth has experienced, right? If it's the most massive release of energy. Another one would have been the Oppenheimer with the bomb, right? Kind of thing. And we understood that took us into a new level of reality. So that's what's happening here with Tonga as well. And this alignment is very unusual. And I knew you were going to say something about a wolf. And of course, we had the wolf moon over the weekend while this was happening. Well, all of this was going on, right? The explosion, this thing with Novak Djokovic, this moon, all of this kind of stuff. And last night, there was just an incredibly full and bright moon. Was it last night or Monday night? It was Monday night.
Well, you saw it both nights.
Okay.
The full moon was on the 17th. So is that 17 at night? If it's 17 at 1 o'clock in the morning, I don't know.
But I find what you were saying about instinctual learning to be fascinating because that was what he said here. I truly try to manifest that kind of determined, instinctual wolf energy on the court, right? So I don't know what all of this means, but the fact that it was all aligned in timing in the way that it was, I think is a truer explanation of what's going on here than the stories that were being told, right? So what is the story about what caused this explosion?
But before we go there, I want to just reflect back a couple of things. First would be Hublot. That's how I pronounce it.
Yeah.
All right. So it's interesting. Like a lot of watch companies, particularly like Swiss luxury watch brands, are like they pride themselves around in 1732 or what have you, like Rolex. And this is like a relatively recent one, but nonetheless. Okay. So Hublot, and this is the scion of the Italian Binda dynasty. Like he's the guy who's that's where this comes from that level of control. But Hublot, the brand name is porthole, which is portal. It's the same word, right? It's portal and porthole. And then we go a little bit even deeper. I mean, if we want to, I'm just pointing out some things. A porthole, like now, not talking about like a portal when we're going to go and say that, but looking at it as the circular hole which you see in a ship. It's also known as the bullseye. And so now we're dealing a lot with with ancient Roman and Greek, and we're going to get into Freemasonic symbology as well. How do I pronounce the two Masonic pillars?
Joachim and Boaz.
Joachim and Boaz, but like it's like kind of like there's something close to that with how also it's not phonetically exactly the same, but I'm also wondering, is it because our phonetics are off about like what's the tennis player's last name?
Djokovic. The proper way to say it in that part of the world is Djokovic.
Yeah, like there's like a play with that. And then, you talk about the wolf, and like all of Rome is based upon like, its history is like, Remulus and Rom, whatever the two twins are who were born by the she-wolf and all of that. Like that's part of it. And then you talked about the Tyrus, the Tras. That's a different city than Tyre, but it's obviously very connected. It's around the same part of the world in the same time period, at least just generally like ancient. And so we're looking at all of this, like kind of like, we pointed out this a little bit in our last episode, was like whoever or whatever Djokovic is, his foundation is definitely run by two of the biggest players who are deeply interwoven in that storyline. And so that definitely deals with all of this mythology. So like going back to your point, like I didn't even think about the proximity between Tonga and Australia, but you're absolute and Antarctica. There's something going on. My sense is like a lot of this is like a cultic ritual on that very, very high Masonic sorcerer level. Right. But then there's also something deeper going on other than that. So that's my take. Okay. So going back to your question about the explosion.
Okay, so real quickly, so Jeff and I were talking about this. We do these little morning dump shows on Friday, and he part of his narrative of how he sees this is like there's a story, and this isn't whether it's true or not, but there's some other kinds of beings that are supposed to emerge from Antarctica during this time, and that all this craziness in Australia is to make the environment right for them, right? And that's why everyone must be poked or whatever, right? And so Djokovic would be the antithesis of that, right? And if these other beings are going to sort of come out in Antarctica, maybe the first place they go is Australia, you definitely can't have the wolf there. And then also, when people think of why he might be resisting, right, the poke or uni, right? And there's many, many reasons why people do and should and whatever kind of thing. But if he has this particular kind of genetics, right, that is going to be activated at this time, and he may not be the only person, right? And that may be what really all this testing and tracking and all this kind of stuff is, to find out who these people are and put the kibosh on them, right? To put the kibosh on that, because whatever these energies coming through can activate something that, reawakens a more primal instinct sort of in humanity. And they've spent all of this time and all of this money trying to breed that out. Breed out the instinctual learning, right? Breed out being in touch with the land and activated by what goes on with the land and all of that kind of stuff, right? So that was part of, you just brought Antarctica into it, right? So that was part of Jeff's narrative. I'm going to pull up that. Can you bring back that Wikipedia of Hublot that you were showing? I just want to point something else out to you.
All right. I think I'm.
If not, I can pull it up.
Yeah, why don't you pull it up?
All right, so let me find the Hublot Wikipedia. Is that what you were on, the Hublot Wikipedia?
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, why am I not getting that? Hublot, was it Hublot or Hublot watches that you looked at?
I did Hublot search wiki.
All right, let's see, watch wiki, no, Wikipedia, here we go. All right, so in the very first paragraph, just saying, right? Where did it go? The part that you were looking at. Hublot.
Right
okay,
there.
right here. So after the portal, the watch that he created featured the first natural rubber strap in the history of watchmaking. It took 3 years of research to create that strap. Despite failing to attract a single potential customer on the first day of its debut at the 1980 Basel Watch Fair. Who else is from Basel?
Federer.
Roger Federer
and Klaus.
Hermann Hesse.
Hermann Hesse. There we go.
Hermann Hesse, right?
There we go.
So that's kind of an interesting note right there, right? And then you have, some other interesting little, I just always like to look at what things are highlighted, right? Like where the blue links are. And there's some interesting stuff down also at Basel World. So Hublot Wise Key. What the hell is that? At Basel World 2009. Look at that. That's the porthole. Look at that.
Hold on. Yeah.
At Basel World 2009, mind you, I think 2009 may have been the first year that Djokovic won a Grand Slam. Hublot unveiled a new method of detecting counterfeit watches.
He beat Federer, didn't he? That year? Or was it?
No, he beat. You know who he beat? Do you know who he beat in the final at the first time he won in an Australian Open? He beat Jo-Wilfried Tsonga, Tsonga, in the final.
Huh.
Tsonga, right? So it sounds like Tonga, and right, kind of thing. Okay, but new method of detecting counterfeit watches. Using a smart card, the system authenticates watches on Hublot's servers. The system went live in August 2009. In 2020, Hublot chose the Aura blockchain to provide an electronic passport and warranty system for all its watches. This is fucking fascinating, right? Think about, what we were saying about some of the things about Djokovic and his foundations and whatever. So this is pulling together blockchain, smart ID, right? And the idea of counterfeiting. Now, obviously, there's the dark side of that aspect, right? But if part of this whole chase is about who carries what genetics and who's faking it, right? Kind of thing, that's also a fascinating sort of part of this story. And what's funny is just yesterday, Jeff and I were tossing around this idea because there is some questions about the Australian Open going forward about, wouldn't it be cool? Like if they moved it to Austin. We were just playing what's going on, because all of these top tennis players in my mind are paired with tech magnets. I'd say that Djokovic is most closely paired with Elon Musk, who's here in Austin, right? But down here, there's a Hublot that's King Power Austin. The Hublot F1 King Power Austin, right? Archived in 2013 at the Wayback Machine. Right. So that's kind of interesting. So I guess they've created a watch for the Formula One, which moved here to Austin. So we were just talking about Austin in regards with maybe they'll have to create a fucking Grand Slam in Austin so that Djokovic will be able to play, because it seems like he's going to get iced out of all of these other ones or whatever. Right. And there's already that Hublot reference to Austin in the F1 racetrack here. So that's kind of interesting. But I just wanted to point out that stuff about the Basel and some of these other interesting connections with this Wise Key and whatnot. This is a pretty interesting company for sure. Even the symbology on it is kind of interesting. But anyway, okay, back to
so I want to respond to what you just said. So so you were saying that it was Robert's viewpoint where he sees all of this having to do with like an introduction to like beings from Antarctica.
That's Jeff. I think whatever
Jeff was saying that. Jeff was saying that.
Jeff thinks there's some new kind of being or some creatures arriving that are coming through something supposed to. I don't know if this is quote his opinion or if this is like
right.
Narrative,
just not, I just want to like establish. I want to play with that as an idea, like because as you say that, what kind of popped in my mind, like I hadn't thought about this at all before this conversation, which we're having, is like, we're watching this whole thing as maybe not even so much of a ritual, like a ritual is as much as like it's really happening, like, and it's happening on that grand scale. So like if this thing which we're describing of like, the something coming through in Antarctica, but the reason why where I'm going with this, or the place I'm going to go with this is, do you remember?
Australia. Go ahead.
So where I'm going with this is the opening ceremony of that tunnel in Switzerland. Remember that?
Yeah.
What do you remember about that?
Like there was these weird, I don't know if I'm confusing it with like some of the things that went on outside of the CERN, but there was like some weird ceremony that was almost like the weird shit you see at the Olympics and people doing weird dancing and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, it was very, very similar to that. And so that's a straight, that came out in 2016, I believe. And so there's a triangle. If you want to go and you want to look at, if you want to go look at Switzerland, for example, there's this interesting, there's your Basel, this is where the tunnel is, and here's CERN, we've got this little triangle, whatever that is. But I'm going by memory. So I'd want to go and relook at, the, at that opening ceremony. But I think it's the same thing in which is what the idea which you're attributing to Jeff, which is this like, this opening up from deep below. That's what this tunnel is, this like burrowing through the mountain, whatever that is, but like tied in like all of this sort of stuff. And what we're seeing is it being done on a different scale. So the opening ceremony of the tunnel is a very like, imagine the scale, like you're a dignitary, you're like a muckety muck, you're Klaus Schwab, and you're watching this, and this has a certain meaning. It's not like the Olympics. It's not meant for everyone to go see. It's like for just a really small set of eyes, but this is a really thoughtful, like, artistic representation. What we're seeing right now is happening on a much greater scale, and the fact that we're actually experiencing it, we're within it. Like, is this really happening? Is somehow they seem connected to me, like the story. And it's like going back to like, we see all the markers of like this Masonic sorcery. And I'm not like limiting it to like the Masons, but I'm limiting it like, to an idea of there being like a specific ritual based ceremony, state sponsored magic, if you will, which is, which is always occulting our culture. So that's seeming more and more like that's what we're looking at on one level.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I agree with you, right? There's all this stuff going on and the people's attention are being drawn to it one way, but there's these things going on sort of in the background that the people who are in the know are looking at this entirely other way. Okay. So just to clarify, Djokovic won the first time in 2008, not in 2009, but had it been 2009, that would have been interesting because the Tonga volcano, that same volcano erupted in 2009 was the last time that, where did you find? Oh, the last time there was a big eruption there, right? That breached sea level during 2009. Now, I think in 2009, if I'm understanding this correctly, let's see, I don't remember. Okay, there was one year, and it could have been, I don't remember if it was 2009 or 2010, that Djokovic had to stop in the middle of the match against Andy Murray. He had not Andy Murray, Andy Roddick. His fitness was terrible. And then whatever happened from there was when he went on the gluten-free diet and turned into this like terrifying tennis player that just beat everybody all the time, right? And I don't know if that failure down there happened in 2009 or in 2010. So it would be interesting if that was in 2009 when it erupted. He also had this drama down there where he had to quit mid-match and got made fun of quite a bit, right? For being such a good tennis player, but having such poor fitness at that time or whatever. So that's kind of interesting. But yes, I think we're watching these very sort of exotic rituals play out. There's an interesting picture of what that volcano looks like now from up above. So before, what it looked like before and what it looked like after. And it is
Can you
literally,
post that? I want to see those pictures.
so it's on her computer. It's on her computer. What is it? How did you search to find it? Like, what is it?
I don't know.
Okay, she's going to send it and I'll pull it up.
All
But
right, perfect.
it is now literally separated into two very similar looking parts and pieces, like almost like people are talking about the world is going to split. There's going to be a timeline split, all of that kind of stuff. Okay, Laura sent it. Let me go get it. Let's see. Did you send it to Proton or to
Proton?
Okay, let me go get that inbox. All right, it's not here yet.
So I want to go back to that original point, which I brought up when we started talking about this, which was this explosion to me was a marker, like a big sign. Like, and what I mean by that, like a line in the sand, like, you know, there's always lines in the sand and some lines in the sand are bigger, like, or like a change, something's happening, like the death of Kobe Bryant, which happened almost 2 years. Like, I think next week it will be the 2-year anniversary, but we're seeing something. And to the furthest extreme, I'm not saying this is going to happen. Like, time will tell. I'm like, what if this is literally them coming through? You know, what if this is literally cracking the mantle in order to let something through? So you're telling me that is what it looked like?
So before and after,
Just a week apart.
right? So this, first of all, you can't have to notice this looks like a bat, like Batman's insignia or whatever, but that's what it looked like before. And this is what it looks like after.
So I'm confused. The picture on the left, is that one unified island, or is in between the islands that like light gray matter? Is that just like smoke and debris?
It's hard to say.
I think
Right.
that's the volcano.
That's the volcano started like bubbling. And this is
Right.
during, you know, like, right, kind of a week, whatever it is, a week later. So whether it actually separated or that's just dust and debris, like there is
ash, probably.
there is a split that has happened here, right? That is left things sort of completely apart and not able to see each other well, which is very similar as to what's going on in this world right now, right? Like, I mean, it's
And isn't that like, you know, everything in, is it La Palma?
La Palma has been doing this ongoing exploding for a really, really interestingly long time.
But the talk and the prophecy and the fear. So like two different signs, like, you know, the geologists are talking about like it's going to split in half. And then like the prophecy is like when the Azores or whatever those islands are, which it's a part of, like when they fall within the Atlantic is when the rising of something happens. Like that's in play. But the point I wanted to make was that's about an island due to a volcano splitting in half. And so if that's what you're showing me is happening in Tonga, like we're seeing this happen 2 times now. So, you know, it doesn't seem to be as extreme right now in the islands in the Atlantic, but then also like, I don't know if this is factual or not, but there's at least a linear thought to say that that explosion was always just a bomb anyway, because there's like, you know, supposedly that video showing like a missile hitting the water, and there's seemingly whether to whatever degree of bullshit it is, none to complete. Like there's a buildup of tension right along this Ukrainian, German, NATO, Russian sort of line. So like that would make sense. Like, is this like a completely manipulated thing? You know, there's a lot of talk about the CERN also with it. So it's right now. I don't think like I don't want to say like this is what's happening as much as like this to me is one is very clearly marking like things are going to change quickly.
Absolutely. And
one way or the other.
It is interesting. You had that meteor or whatever that we talked about a couple of weeks ago in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
right?
The meteor, which there's not a single piece of footage which shows the meteor that would make this huge explosion.
Right. So the other thing is like, okay, so the video that I saw did look like it was some kind of like bomb or some kind of something else. It was a very strange looking video, right? So, but this split that happened there. So I watched this. There's 2 things I want to kind of refer to. I watched this show back last year called Katla, right? That was about an ongoing erupting volcano on a glacier in Iceland. right? And what this started to do was it started to produce changelings and copies of people and things like that that were coming out of it, right? That like it was literally duplicating unresolved portions or other versions of people coming out of it. It was a fascinating show. The first episode or two is really slow. It's interesting to watch. But with all of this erupting going on, and I've talked about this in relation to Palma before, but in some ways, this part here is also very interesting with this, right? Like, what is happening? Is there a split going on, and will there be a version of each of us on these split realities, right? Like some kind of changeling, and how do you know who you ended up with and which version you end up and all that kind of stuff? But also the thing in New Mexico back in the 40s, right? And when you watch Twin Peaks, the newer season of Twin Peaks, right? That the basically the narrative that is being shown without being stated is that there were these interlopers or travelers that were able to come in and start invading a la electricity at that point. Like they literally came in and started taking over the reality through electricity at the time that that bomb went off. And that we've been living with that basically ever since on a certain level. Right? Like
say that last line again, more slowly, please.
That when the bomb went off, there were these other creatures that travel through electricity that were able to come in and begin infiltrating the reality. And we've been living with that on a certain level ever since. Right?
The explosions in 1945
in New Mexico, in the Whitesands.
In New Mexico, the Whitesands.
Yes. Right. And so like whenever there's this enormous release of energy, there's things that obviously go out and there's things that obviously come in. But whatever it is that the new frequency that is generated by that which just happened, like there are travelers that like that's, you know, just like when Lance Armstrong rides his bicycle, the Tour de France, there's people who are part of his team that are there not to win, but just to create the right drag wind for him to be able to ride better, right? Like that's why they ride in packs. Like they have a whole team that rides around them, right? Like they're trying to create the flow and the energy and whatever so that he can race through. Same thing. There's probably creatures, beings, consciousnesses, energies, entities out there that like a certain hum. And when one of these activities creates that hum, it's like, aha, now I can sail in, right? Like that's the pace I can travel at, right? And so, and that goes both ways. That goes out and in, right? So it'll be interesting to see, you know, what goes on, right? Like, you know, as a sort of result of this and how long Tonga is disconnected for, right? And sort of, it would be really interesting to get the perception of a person who is in Tonga as opposed to Westerners reporting on what's going on in Tonga.
Yeah.
It was
I want to pull up this map on Tonga because this is interesting. All right.
It was 7.4. So the reverse of 47 isn't 1947, like when Roswell thing happened and when all this stuff happened with the other creatures coming in or whatever. So we've got the reverse of that.
So let's go look at this. All right. So this is just to give a point of reference. This is where Australia is, and the red, the exclamation mark is where the volcano is.
Mm-hmm.
This is New Zealand. This is yeah, we can see all this. So we're going to zoom in here real close to Fiji. And, you know, you could go and we start to look at that. Like I always like when we see these straight lines, right? We always like the straight lines. It's a straight line on the bottom. So we come in here and we start to like get more and more resolution. And what you see is what I'm assuming this is what it looks like to me. These areas of blue right here, you can zoom in on and you have high resolution. And then this blue right here is kind of like it's grayed out. You don't have the same resolution. So said maybe another way, like these are the areas where you can zoom in Google Earth, and those are the other areas where you can't. So let's keep going in. This is the main island, I guess, of Tonga. This looks like the highest population center. I don't know how many people live in Tonga. And so I don't know when this image was taken for Google Earth, but we could see this was obviously done beforehand. So what this island looks like is This is the volcano. It was expressed of being inside the ocean, but this appears to be at least the opening of the hole. The opening of the hole, the portal, the porthole. This is what it looked like whenever this Google Earth. Let's see. Will they let me drive around? Imagine that they won't let me drive around. But this is what it looks like. So here's that main island. Here's the second one. And then this like circle in the middle. And then look how the water is different. So going along this, the kind of line of thought of what exactly is the nature of Earth and what exactly is happening with Earth. Like this seemingly is like something of significance, the perfect circular nature of this, the change of color of water. This looks like it's shoreline right here, right? I mean, this looks spectacular. I would love to see what that would have looked like.
Also, it would be interesting, like people's attention for several years have been drawn to Antarctica as something is under the ground, something is going to come out of there. That would be the great distract from this if this were really the spot. And that does look like the kind of porthole that something interesting might come through, right? I want to show you something else, Jeff. So go back to like the original map that you pulled up when you started down this narrative. If you can pull that back up, I want to show you something.
Like with Australia?
There we go. Tasman Sea, right? So Tasmania, right? The Tasman Sea. All right. So stop your share. I want to show you something.
All right.
So the other day when Jeff and I were doing this, he also brought me this. And for some reason, I was thinking about closing this window last night, but I didn't because I was like, I feel like I'm going to need it. And here we are, and I need it. So look at this. He showed up with this the other day. Black box that could record collapse of civilization set to be installed on Earth, right? And guess where they were going to install it?
Tasmania.
Let me find right here, right? University of where is it? Tasmania. The black box, which is set to be built on the west coast of Tasmania, will be connected to the internet and record information to help a future civilization if humanity suffers a major apocalyptic event. That sure sounds like interesting timing. This was all going on right when that was happening in Tonga, who now has no internet.
Ooh, what are they creating?
Like, what the hell is that? Like, I mean, just we're going to create this box and we're going to connect it to the internet. Like, what? All right.
Right. And this is what it's going to look like. Now, I know if they're saying that they're going to do it, it's already been done. Right. There's no, we're going to do something and we're going to tell you ahead of time. Developers are working with academics to record viral data. When I'm looking at these smokestack stuff here, it also reminds me of what it looks like when the stuff is continuously erupting. Like, right? Like, is that data coming out that they're trying to, right? Like, I don't, save the planet. So this is all interesting timing that these things are all happening in sort of a sync with each other, right? And then what is going on? So when you were showing one of those pictures of that and saying that the coastline looks interesting and that circle looked interesting, that vibration that, like, if you pull that back up, there was a vibration around it that sounded kind of like what we were talking about last week with cymatics, right? Cognitive cymatics and how people's brains are being vibrated into position. And think about what is going on with the Australian people. Like, I have never seen a people so fervently cheering for their own enslavement, right? Like, or at least, I mean, I'm sure that there's more resistors than we're made aware of. Obviously, I know some of them are listeners to this show, right? But literally, you have Australian people there who are like, woohoo! That's some serious cognitive cymatics, right? And it's going on at the same time that all this other stuff is happening there. And they're like, literally, the volcano is being used. The Tongan explosion, they never do things for just one reason, right? Opening a porthole, bringing things through, but also vibrating the brain matter of all of the people in the area into just being like, well, woohoo, right? This is wonderful. I don't know.
That image of the black box, right? Mm-hmm. And where is this? This is, I guess that could record the collapse. That looks more like, it was once expressed maybe in a movie or something about building an ark.
Yeah.
Like when like that looks more like what those arcs look like to float around, like, and it's situated to go and just be picked up and float around. Like, I don't know what this thing is, but that's what pops in my mind.
Well, listen to this. According to Interesting Engineering, the black box on the west coast of Tasmania, so that west coast of Tasmania is like the closest area over there to Tonga, right? Around 150 miles to the south of Australia, which will launch this year. It is set to outlive us all and is visually striking. A 32-foot indestructible steel monolith, so it's the monolith, right? Filled with hard drives that will record all major events about climate change powered by solar panels, right? Like, I mean, like, because that's what people should be worried about if the end of civilization is coming, is make sure that we record it so we'll know what I mean, just the whole thing is hilarious. Battery packs will help provide power backup when the sun isn't visible or if there's some sort of major apocalyptic event. The location away from civilization was chosen for its geopolitical and geological stability. Right? That's cute. It's geopolitical stability. Does that mean like we have that island under complete lockdown? So that's their idea of stability. And the data recorded will be protected by a layer of steel, 7.5 centimeters thick.
There's there's something's up.
The idea is if the Earth does crash as a result of climate change, this indestructible recording device will be there for whoever's left to learn from that. Right, because their computer will have survived and they'll be able to plug it in using their USB port. Right, like, come on. Right. It's also there to hold leaders to account, to make sure their action or inaction is recorded. Jonathan Nieborn, a co-founder of the art collective The Glue Society, added, "It's built to outlive us all. If the worst does happen, just because the power grids go down, this thing will still be there." Right? So they can't build infrastructure for humanity that will survive all of that stuff, but they can build one to record everything in case there is no humanity. All right. According to the project's website, the purpose of the device is to provide an unbiased account of the events that lead to the demise of the planet, hold accountability for future generations, and inspire urgent action.
It's like a bunch of bullshit.
Right?
So,
like to compare it to the Rosetta Stone. Like the Rosetta Stone, we would look to use multiple formats of encoding.
So we
are exploring the possibility of including an electronic reader that stays within the box and will be activated upon exposure to sunlight, also reactivating the box if it has entered a long-term dormant state as a result of a catastrophe.
So can you go back to the part where it had the quote of the guy? I think his name was, I don't remember his name, but it said then the name of his, there it is. So there we go back, yep. Stop. The project is being carried out by Clemenger BBO, Australia's largest marketing communication company.
Mm-hmm.
So why is an advertising agency, they're the drivers behind this?
Well, then also look at what the next sentence says. They're still trying to establish how the data could be accessed following an apocalyptic event, but hope in the meantime to increase accountability amongst businesses and politicians.
So yeah, like right away, it says the project is being carried out. Let me grab the screen for a second. It's by Clemenger BBDO. So I need you to shut the there we go. So BBDO is a worldwide advertising agency, and what we're seeing right here is just like, you know, they're the Australia. This is like the Australia. I don't know what the exact business model is, but you know, if it's an actual franchise or what have you, but they're connected. This is like as big as you get for advertising companies and marketing campaigns.
Look, the Omnicom group sounds a lot like Omicron, the Omnicom group.
And so it's just the whole thing is just so that this story, which we're just like, what even is that story? Is it just like the whole thing is like a puff piece? We were joking beforehand about like, well, if they tell us about it, like it's already in existence. And I think that is true for a lot of the times, but then also like sometimes they just make up total shit.
Right.
And like whatever this is, like this whole thing is being told to you by these two different things: interesting engineering, and then also this advertising company. You go and look at interesting engineering. I have no idea what they are. There's no about us on this website. The whole thing is like it's a mental idea. Like, what is it even about?
So the thing that keeps coming to my head is like, none of what they say about it is what it is. These people are obsessed with energy and storing energy and are afraid of running out of energy. And if there's about to be the biggest explosion of energy that's ever happened on Earth, then you'd want something to catch that energy in. Like, right? Like it's a battery that just got charged.
Right.
And that charged battery would be the kind of thing that is enough energy to reanimate something, right? You make your fake collapse for everybody else, right? But you want to re-up your grid that nobody knows still exists afterwards. You're going to need a lot of energy for that. That's what that shit looks like to me.
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
All right. So I don't know what that just was, but that was an interesting rabbit trail we went down. Finishing thoughts, and then we'll take a quick potty break and come back and talk about movies.
Finishing thoughts. I'm still going back to like I'm looking for the next couple days for something next week or so, maybe leading up to February 2nd, to look for something major on the big screen movie, which they're projecting in the masses of minds. That's my final thought, somehow connected to all this.
All right. And I just had a thought, and I don't know if this is why you said it, because I can't remember if you said it before or after we looked at this, but did you say the thing about Joachim and Boaz based on this symbology here, or did you even see that symbology?
No, I didn't even think about that symbology. I was saying that just based upon like, I saw Tyrus, which makes me always think about like the Masonic legends prior. And then just listening to you pronounce Djokovic's name, like I was like, it made me think of the pillars.
Right. Okay. So look what the symbolism is on that watch. So I think that's
very much so
fascinating as well. All right. Okay. So we're going to take a quick potty break and come back. Join us on the other side, patreon.com/offplanetmedia, projectkids.locals.com, or emilymoyer.locals.com for the other half of this. And we'll see you on the other side. Bye.